The case of Junko Furuta is one of the most tragic and infamous criminal cases in Japan. Occurring in 1988, it involved the abduction and brutalization of a young girl over a period of 44 days. This case has since become a pivotal reference point in discussions about juvenile crime and justice in Japan. It highlighted the brutal reality of crime against minors and exposed significant flaws in the legal system. Junko Furuta was a 17-year-old high school student who was kidnapped on her way home from school. The details of her ordeal are both harrowing and complex, revealing a series of failures at multiple levels, from societal to judicial. These failures allowed perpetrators to commit heinous acts with alarming impunity. The case shocked the nation and drew international attention due to its gruesome nature. This essay will follow a timeline format to lay out the significant events of the case. It will introduce the victim and her assailants, delve into the specifics of her captivity, and explore the investigation and legal proceedings that followed. The public reaction, which led to widespread discussions on legal reform, will also be examined. The case of Junko Furuta is significant not only for its brutality but also for its impact on Japan's legal system and society. It serves as a stark reminder of the horrors of crime and the importance of justice for victims. The following sections will provide a detailed account of this tragic case, illustrating its profound implications. On November 25, 1988, Junko Furuta's life took a tragic turn. She was abducted while walking home from school in Misato, Saitama Prefecture. Junko, known for being a diligent student with a bright future, was targeted by a group of young men. The abduction was orchestrated by Hiroshi Miyano, who was acquainted with Furuta. He, along with his accomplices, had been involved in a number of criminal activities prior to this incident. Miyano and his friends had a history of delinquency and were known for their involvement in minor crimes. Their actions on that day, however, marked a significant escalation in their criminal behavior. The group used intimidation tactics to force Furuta into submission, initiating a chain of events that would lead to her prolonged captivity and suffering. The abduction was not a random act of violence but rather a calculated move by Miyano and his group. They sought to exploit Junko for their own malicious purposes, demonstrating a shocking level of premeditation. The perpetrators' ability to carry out such a plan without immediate intervention from bystanders or authorities is indicative of the broader societal issues at play. The initial days of the abduction were crucial, as they set the stage for the events that followed. Despite opportunities for intervention, Junko's plight went unnoticed by those around her. The breakdown of social vigilance and community responsibility contributed to the prolonged nature of her ordeal. Junko Furuta was a typical high school student with aspirations and dreams. Born in Misato, Saitama Prefecture, she was known for her academic diligence and friendly demeanor. Friends and teachers described her as a bright and promising young girl who had ambitions of pursuing a successful career. Her sudden disappearance left her family and community in shock and despair. Her life before the tragedy was characterized by normalcy and routine. She attended Yashio Minami High School, where she was well liked by her peers. Junko enjoyed participating in school activities and had a close-knit group of friends. Her future seemed promising, and she was on the path to achieving her goals. The details of her personality and life underscore the brutality of her abduction and captivity. Junko was not involved in any activities that would typically expose her to danger or risk. Her selection as a victim was purely opportunistic, further highlighting the randomness and senselessness of the crime. Junko Furuta's story is a poignant reminder of the vulnerability of young people in society. Her case emphasizes the need for greater protective measures and awareness to safeguard the youth. The tragedy of her life cut short serves as a catalyst for discussions on child safety and legal accountability. The crime against Junko Furuta was perpetrated by a group of 4 young men. Hiroshi Miyano, the ringleader, was 18 years old at the time of the crime. He was known for his involvement in local gangs and had a history of violent behavior. Miyano's criminal tendencies were well documented, but he had managed to evade significant legal consequences prior to this incident. The other 3 accomplices were Nobuharu Minato, who was 16 years old, Yo Ogura, and Yasushi Watanabe, both 17 years old. Like Miyano, they had records of delinquency and were associated with gangs. These young men shared a common environment that fostered their antisocial behavior, and their camaraderie fueled their propensity for crime. Their backgrounds reveal a lack of supervision and intervention, both from their families and the broader community. The perpetrators were products of an environment that failed to address their escalating criminal behavior. This neglect contributed significantly to their ability to commit such a heinous act. The role of each perpetrator in Junko's captivity varied, but all were complicit in her suffering. Their actions were not only criminal but also indicative of a deep-seated disregard for human life and dignity. The case raises critical questions about the societal factors that allowed these individuals to act with such impunity. Section 5. Captivity, the first week. During the first week of her captivity, Junko was held in a house belonging to one of the perpetrators' families. The location of her confinement was initially unknown to the outside world, and her disappearance was yet to attract significant attention. The house, situated in a suburban neighborhood, became the site of unimaginable cruelty. The perpetrators imposed severe restrictions on Junko's freedom, ensuring she could not escape or attract attention. They subjected her to physical and psychological abuse, creating an atmosphere of constant fear and intimidation. These early days set the tone for the prolonged period of captivity that followed. Despite being in a residential area, the crime went unnoticed by neighbors and passers-by. This lack of intervention from the community highlights a significant societal failure to detect and prevent such abuses. The perpetrators operated with a sense of impunity, emboldened by the belief that their actions would go unchallenged. During this initial period, the perpetrators' parents were reportedly unaware of the full extent of what was happening in their home. The lack of parental oversight and accountability further contributed to the continuation of the crime. This initial phase of captivity was critical, as it established the dynamics that would persist throughout Junko's ordeal. Section 6. Captivity, the second week to the end. As the weeks progressed, Junko's situation became increasingly dire. Her captors continued to subject her to severe abuse, both physically and mentally. The conditions of her captivity deteriorated, and her health began to decline. Despite the severity of her situation, there was no immediate intervention from external parties. The prolonged nature of Junko's ordeal was facilitated by a complex web of deceit and manipulation. The perpetrators spread misinformation to prevent any potential rescue attempts. They capitalized on the lack of communication and coordination between authorities and the community, effectively prolonging her suffering. Efforts by Junko's family and friends to locate her were met with frustration and obstacles. The initial police response was limited, hindered by a lack of concrete leads and the perpetrators' efforts to cover their tracks. This period of captivity was marked by a sense of isolation and hopelessness for Junko. The end of her captivity came after a prolonged period of neglect and abuse. The conclusion of her ordeal was marked by tragedy, prompting a belated response from authorities. The failure to intervene sooner resulted in irreversible consequences, highlighting significant gaps in the protective measures for victims of crime. Section 7. The investigation, uncovering the crime. The investigation into Junko Furuta's disappearance began after her captors inadvertently revealed the crime to a friend. This individual, initially unaware of the full scope of the situation, eventually reported the matter to the police. This report prompted a response from law enforcement, leading to the uncovering of the crime. Upon receiving the report, police initiated an investigation that led them to the location of Junko's captivity. The discovery of the crime scene revealed the extent of the abuse she had suffered. This pivotal moment marked the beginning of the legal proceedings against the perpetrators. The investigation faced numerous challenges, including the initial lack of evidence and the need to navigate the legal rights of the juvenile offenders. Law enforcement officials were tasked with piecing together the series of events that had led to Junko's tragic demise. This process involved extensive interviews and the collection of forensic evidence. The complexity of the case underscored the need for a thorough and meticulous approach to criminal investigations involving minors. The lessons learned from this investigation have since informed changes in police procedures and protocols, aiming to prevent similar oversights in the future. Section 8. Legal outcomes, trials and sentences. The legal proceedings following the discovery of Junko Furuta's case were closely watched by the public and media. The perpetrators were arrested and brought to trial, facing charges that included murder and abduction. Due to their ages, the legal system was faced with the challenge of balancing justice with the principles of juvenile rehabilitation. The trial revealed the extent of the crimes committed and the roles played by each of the perpetrators. Despite the severity of their actions, the sentences handed down by the court were a subject of controversy. Hiroshi Miyano, as the ringleader, received a longer sentence, but the others were given relatively lighter sentences due to their status as minors. Public dissatisfaction with the legal outcomes was palpable, with many feeling that the sentences did not adequately reflect the severity of the crimes. The case highlighted significant flaws in the juvenile justice system, particularly in its handling of serious offenses. It prompted calls for legal reform and a reassessment of the treatment of juvenile offenders in cases of extreme violence. The legal outcomes of the Junko Furuta case continue to influence discussions on criminal justice in Japan. They serve as a reminder of the complexities involved in balancing the rights of young offenders with the need for justice for victims and their families. Section 9. Public reaction, shock and outcry. The public reaction to the Junko Furuta case was one of shock and outrage. News of the crime and the details of Junko's suffering spread rapidly, capturing national and international attention. The brutality of the case and the perceived inadequacy of the legal response led to widespread public discourse on crime and justice. Media coverage played a significant role in shaping public perception of the case. Reports highlighted the failures in the system and the need for greater protection for victims of crime. The case became a focal point for discussions on the treatment of juvenile offenders and the need for legal reforms. Public protests and campaigns were organized to demand justice for Junko Furuta. These movements called for harsher penalties for serious crimes and greater accountability for young offenders. The case also sparked debates on the role of the media in reporting criminal cases and the ethics of sensationalism. The legacy of the public reaction to the Junko Furuta case is evident in the ongoing conversations about legal reforms and victim rights in Japan. The case serves as a catalyst for change, reminding society of the importance of vigilance, justice, and compassion in the face of tragedy. Section 10. Conclusion: the impact of the Junko Furuta case. The tragic case of Junko Furuta has left an indelible mark on Japan's society and legal system. It highlighted the vulnerabilities of the juvenile justice system and the need for reform in addressing serious crimes. The case prompted widespread discussions on the balance between rehabilitation and retribution in the context of juvenile offenders. Junko Furuta's story is a somber reminder of the consequences of crime and the importance of justice for victims. The case has inspired legal changes aimed at better protecting victims and holding offenders accountable. It also emphasizes the need for community vigilance and proactive intervention in preventing crime. The impact of the Junko Furuta case extends beyond legal reforms, influencing societal attitudes towards crime and justice. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of complacency and the necessity of a robust legal system to safeguard the vulnerable. In summarizing the case, it is clear that Junko Furuta's legacy is one of both tragedy and transformation. Her story continues to resonate, serving as a powerful testament to the need for justice and the enduring impact of crime on individuals and society as a whole.